The Wild West you think you know, the one frozen in dusty photographs and heroic legends, hides far more than it shows. Those faded images of cowboys leaning against rail fences, main streets lined with wagons, and families standing stiffly in front of new-built homes were carefully selected, cleaned up, and approved. They were meant to preserve a simpler memory of a world that felt wide open, a time when the horizon promised freedom and the future seemed just one trail ride away. What didn't fit that comforting picture was locked away, destroyed, or quietly forgotten. Cameras in the late 19th century didn't just capture history, they captured moments people weren't ready to face. Brutality, fear, exploitation, and the cost of survival in a land that demanded everything and gave nothing back for free. These were images that threatened the myth of progress America was trying to sell. For decades, entire collections of photographs were banned, censored, or buried in private archives. Some were seized by authorities. Others were hidden by families who wanted to remember the West as it felt, not as it truly was. The laughter in saloons, the creak of saddle leather at dawn, the quiet pride of building something from nothing, all of it existed alongside violence, loss, and silence. In the next few minutes, you're going to see the real Wild West through 30 banned photos you were never meant to see. Images that pull back the curtain on life after the gun smoke cleared and the frontier closed in on itself. These aren't the pictures passed down in school books. These are the ones history tried to forget. Number 30. The legalized brothels of Arizona. This image takes us into the pitch-black shadows of the 19th century economy, where the oldest profession was a pillar of civic development. In Arizona and several neighboring territories, prostitution was legalized and strictly regulated. This wasn't because the town councils were progressive, but because they were greedy. These licensed brothels generated massive income through licensing fees, taxes, and frequent moral fines that were essentially a protection racket. This money didn't just line pockets, it funded the very infrastructure of the West, building the roads, schools, and courthouses that we now associate with civilization. However, despite their vital economic contribution, the women in these photos faced extreme discrimination and marginalization. These photos were often suppressed because they showed the faces of the women who literally built the West Treasury, yet were forbidden from entering the same public buildings their labor had funded. The authorities wanted the tax revenue, but they didn't want the visual proof of who was providing it. Number 29. Seth Kinman's Elkhorn Chair. This image features the eccentric master hunter Seth Kinman, a man whose name was once synonymous with the rawest form of frontier skill. Kinman was famous for his ability to track the most elusive game in the redwood forests, but his true legacy was his gifts to political power. He crafted an incredible chair using elk horns and bearskin, creating a throne of bone and fur that he personally presented to President Andrew Johnson. This photo captures a moment where the visceral, bloody reality of the frontier met the highest office in the land. The image was often kept out of standard history books because it was deemed too barbaric for a nation trying to appear sophisticated. It serves as a reminder that the connection between the wild frontier and the halls of Washington, D.C. was much closer and more grisly than we are often told. Number 28. The Refugees of the Dakota War. This is a rare, haunting photograph of people fleeing the Dakota War of 1862. While we often see photos of the soldiers and the chiefs, the images of the civilian displacement were frequently suppressed because they showed the total breakdown of civilized life on the frontier. This photograph captures families in a state of utter panic, their wagons overloaded with only the most basic necessities as they fled toward the safety of Fort Ridgely. It was a moment of extreme geopolitical tension where the promises of the Homestead Act met the violent reality of a land already inhabited. The government didn't want this image circulated in the East because it contradicted the peaceful settlement narrative and terrified potential immigrants who were thinking of moving west. In this photo, you can see the harrowing brutality and the raw fear in the eyes of those caught in the crossfire of a war that claimed hundreds of lives in just a few weeks. It serves as a somber reminder of the displacement and chaos that defined the early 1860s, a detail history books often gloss over in favor of more heroic battle scenes. Number 27. Annie Oakley's Secret Empowerment. This image brings us the legendary Annie Oakley, but not in the way you saw her in Buffalo Bills posters or the Hollywood biopics. Beyond the stage performances and the global celebrity status, Oakley used her fame for a secret, more radical mission, empowering women through firearms. In an era where a woman's place was strictly defined by the domestic sphere and the corset, Oakley secretly trained thousands of women to handle pistols and rifles. These photos were rare and often discouraged by male-dominated media outlets because they promoted self-defense, independence, and a level of confidence that threatened the social status quo. Oakley famously believed that the gun was the great equalizer in a world of physical disparity, and these hidden training sessions were her way of ensuring that women in the Wild West could survive the brutality of the trial without relying on a man's protection. She was building an army of independent women, a fact the history books largely ignored to keep her image dainty. If these stories are changing the way you look at the Old West, hit that like button right now. We want to hear from you. Which of these figures do you think had the hardest life? Let us know in the comments below. Number 26. The Cow School Bus of 1907. This is a truly remarkable and nostalgic snapshot from 1907 that seems like it belongs in a frontier fever dream. In a world a million miles away from modern transportation or paved roads, a cow became a town's heroine. Every single day, this reliable, slow-moving animal was tasked with carrying 7 children to school on her broad back. This photo was often tucked away in family albums as a rural oddity, but it speaks volumes about the desperate ingenuity of pioneers who had absolutely nothing to work with. When horses were too expensive to maintain or needed urgently for the plow, the family cow stepped in as the primary mode of transport. Can you imagine the sheer patience of that animal and the resilience of those children, making their way to class through the mud, dust, and rattlesnakes of the frontier? It captures a simpler, tougher time that has been completely erased by the age of the yellow school bus and the interstate highway. Number 25. Ponca Scouts Skinning a Buffalo. The image shows Ponca Indian Scouts at the 101 Ranch in Bliss, Oklahoma, 1890. This image is visceral, bloody, and gritty, depicting the Scouts in the act of skinning a massive buffalo carcass. It was frequently censored because it didn't fit the Western progress narrative that preferred images of Indians in suits or children in boarding schools. The photo shows the painful intersection of two worlds. The Scouts were technically employees of a ranch owned by white settlers, yet they were practicing a visceral skill that had sustained their ancestors for 10,000 years. It highlights the cultural transition of the 1890s, where traditional life-sustaining skills were being commodified for ranch work and the wild buffalo were being systematically replaced by fenced-in herds for Eastern consumption. It's a somber visual of a lifestyle being dismantled even as its expertise was being exploited. Number 24. The Hunters of Four Peaks. This takes us to the Four Peaks region of Arizona, a place where the wildlife was as dangerous as the jagged, sun-bleached terrain. This photo shows a group of hunters who braved a region teeming with mule deer, massive bears, and the silent, deadly cougars of the high desert. In the late 19th century, hunting wasn't just about sport or trophies. It was about territorial dominance and survival. These men are shown with their kills, but the expressions on their faces are not of joy or triumph, but of pure, cold survival. The photo was often kept out of public circulation because it revealed the sheer, unvarnished brutality required to hold even a small piece of land in Arizona. Every meal was a victory over a predator that wanted to kill you just as much as you wanted to kill it, and this image captures that primal tension perfectly. Number 23. Cow Claw's Band Dance. This is the 1906 portrait of Cow Claw, a Tlingit woman wearing her magnificent potlatch dance attire. This photo is more than a portrait. It is a secret act of political and cultural rebellion. At the time this was taken, the US and Canadian governments had banned the potlatch ceremony, viewing it as a wasteful and pagan practice that hindered the forced assimilation of indigenous peoples. To wear this attire and pose for a camera was a massive legal risk that could result in imprisonment. The photo captures a culture refusing to die, using traditional symbolism, heavy cedar weaving, and ancient dance to preserve a history that the authorities were actively trying to burn. Outlaws' expression is one of defiant dignity, a woman holding on to her soul in a world that was trying to force her into a new, unrecognizable mold of westernized womanhood. Number 22. The Pioneer's Big Tree Cabin. This image shows a scene from 1886 at Calaveras Big Trees State Park. Here, pioneers didn't just build log cabins, they literally carved their homes into the massive, hollowed-out trunks of sequoias that had been standing since before the birth of Christ. This photo was often suppressed because it made the civilized settlers look like they were living in holes in the ground, which didn't help the marketing narrative of European sophistication in the West. In reality, it was a testament to the extreme environmental adaptation required to survive in the California wilderness. These trees offered a level of insulation, fireproofing, and protection that a standard log cabin couldn't provide. The photo reveals that the taming of the West was actually a process of humans learning to humble themselves and live inside the giants of the natural world. Number 21. The Resilience of the Mountain Man. This is a rare, unwashed glimpse into the life of a mountain man, a figure who lived in total crushing solitude in the most rugged peaks of the West. These men were the true ghosts of the frontier hunters and explorers who thrived where no one else could even breathe. This photo was suppressed for years because it showed the physical and mental toll of extreme isolation. These men often returned to trading posts with a 1,000-yard stare, sun-scorched skin that looked like leather, and an inability to speak or interact with other humans. The image reminds us that the cost of frontier freedom was often a total disconnect from humanity, a price that many pioneers paid without realizing the consequences until the silence of the mountains became the only language they knew. Number 20. The Shoshone Indians, a world in transition. This image captures a group of Shoshone Indians between 1880 and 1910. This was the era of the vanishing frontier, where the federal government was trying to turn nomadic hunters into stationary, dependent farmers. This photo was rare because it captured the Shoshone in a state of cultural limbo. In the image, you can see traditional buckskin and beadwork mixed with government-issued calico fabrics and discarded army coats. It's a visual representation of a people who were being forced to navigate two entirely different realities simultaneously. The photo was often kept out of textbooks because it showed the messy, uncomfortable, and often tragic reality of forced assimilation, a process that was far from the peaceful transition depicted in government reports. Number 19. The Indian Boy and His Dog. This is a tender, simple, and heartbreaking photo from 1874 Utah, showing an Indian boy and his dog. In a period defined by conflict, Indian wars, and the rhetoric of extermination, this image was often buried or destroyed because it was far too relatable to the public. It humanized the enemy in a way that was politically inconvenient. It shows a child with the same universal, unconditional bond to an animal that any settler child in New York or Chicago would have. The government of the time preferred photos that made indigenous people look threatening or exotic to justify their removal. This photo instead reveals the innocence and humanity that were being systematically trampled under the heavy feet of Western expansion. Number 18. The Overland Stage Office. This brings us to the Holiday's Overland Stage Office in Denver, Colorado, circa 1865. This was the central nervous system of the West's communication and gold transport. This photo was once a restricted image because it showed the specific security measures, the thickness of the doors, and the locations of the gold vaults. In a world populated by stagecoach robberies and organized outlaw gangs like the James Younger Gang, knowing the layout of this office was worth a fortune. It's a snapshot of the high-stakes logistics that kept the West connected to the East, a world of heavy iron boxes, nervous armed guards, and a constant, suffocating fear of the men waiting in the shadows of the next canyon. Number 17. Quanah Parker, the last Comanche chief. This is the legendary Quanah Parker, the last and perhaps greatest chief of the Comanches. For decades, he led his Lords of the Plains in a fierce, blood-soaked guerrilla resistance against the U.S. Army. This photo captures him not in the heat of battle, but in the quiet, reflective aftermath of the conflict. Parker was a master of political adaptation, eventually becoming a wealthy rancher, a business mogul, and an influential leader who negotiated directly with U.S. presidents. The photo was controversial because it showed a man who had refused to be broken, a leader who transitioned from the warrior life to the boardroom without ever losing his Comanche soul. It challenged the narrative that the Indians were a disappearing race. Number 16. The Hatfield Unity. This image shows the Hatfield family in 1888. While the world knows them for the infamous, decades-long Hatfield-McCoy feud, this photo was intended to show their internal strength and unity. The image was suppressed by the media of the time because it made the Hatfields look like a respectable, organized, and deeply loyal family rather than the lawless, illiterate hillbillies the newspapers wanted to portray to sell more copies. It highlights the fierce, ancient code of loyalty that governed the backcountry, where your last name was your only law, your word was your bond, and your kin were the only army you could ever truly trust to stand by you when the shooting started. Number 15. The Roundup in South Dakota. This captures the changing of horses on a roundup in 1890. This was the peak of the cattle kingdom, a world defined by dust, the smell of burnt hair, and endless movement. This photo was often excluded from the romantic version of cowboy life found in dime novels because it showed the physical devastation and sheer ugliness of the work. The horses look skeletal and exhausted, and the men look like they haven't slept in weeks, their clothes caked in layers of filth and cow dung. It's a raw look at the labor that fueled the American beef industry, proving that the cowboy life was less about singing around a campfire and more about the brutal, relentless, and often boring work of managing thousands of half-wild animals in a land that didn't want them there. Number 14. Billy the Kid's Card Game. This is the holy grail of outlaw photography. One of only 2 confirmed photos of Billy the Kid taken in 1877. It captures the kid playing cards with his gang in a New Mexico saloon. For a century, this photo was suppressed and its authenticity questioned because it didn't look like a criminal portrait. Billy looks happy, relaxed, and surrounded by people who clearly liked him. The authorities and the law and order party wanted the public to see a monster. But this photo showed a likable, charismatic, and boyish young man. It's a visual that complicates our understanding of the frontier's most famous outlaw, suggesting that the Kid was a much more complex, perhaps even tragic figure than the wanted posters ever admitted. Number 13. The Rufus Buck Gang. This image features the Rufus Buck Gang, a group of young African American and indigenous outlaws who terrorized the Indian Territory in the 1890s. This photo was taken shortly after their capture and just days before their execution by hanging. It was strictly censored and kept out of general circulation for years because it showed the raw racial and social tensions of the post-Civil War era. The gang wasn't just robbing for profit, they were lashing out in a nihilistic rage against a system that had displaced their families and stripped them of their future. Their story is a dark, uncomfortable chapter of the West that many historians wanted to leave out of the history books to avoid discussing the systematic social failures that created such desperate and violent men. Number 12. Geronimo's Last Defiance. This is a rare and powerful image of Geronimo, the Apache leader whose name became a synonym for fear among U.S. settlers. This photo was taken during one of his many periods of negotiation, where he was technically a prisoner of war. It was often cropped or edited in the press to make him look submissive or defeated, but the original unbanned version shows a man whose eyes remain calculating, defiant, and dangerous even in captivity. It serves as a reminder that the conquest of the Apache was never truly final until Geronimo himself decided to stop fighting. He was a master of psychological warfare, and even in a photograph, he seems to be challenging the viewer to try and hold him. Number 11. Loading cattle in Abilene. This image shows the McCoy's stockyard in Abilene, Kansas, 1867. This is the exact geographic point where the Wild West truly collided with the industrial world. This photo was once hidden from public view because it showed the extreme cruelty, the stench, and the chaos of the cattle industry. Thousands of frightened animals packed into tiny, mud-filled pens, waiting for the iron cars of the railroad to take them to the slaughterhouses of Chicago. It captures the exact moment the open range turned into a mass production factory, a transition that many romanticized Westerners wanted to forget in favor of the image of the lone rider under the stars. Number 10. Joe Black Fox, the Showman. This features Joe Black Fox, a Sioux Indian who was a star in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. These photos were unique because they showed indigenous people as global celebrities who traveled to London, Paris, and Rome. They were suppressed by those who wanted to keep the Indian image confined to the reservation. Joe Black Fox used his role to travel and see a world that most Americans of the time could never imagine, proving that the frontier wasn't just a place. It was an international sensation. Number 9. Judge Roy Bean's Saloon Court. This image shows the law west of the Pecos, Judge Roy Bean. He was an eccentric figure who presided over cases while intoxicated and held court in his own saloon. This photo was often mocked or hidden by legal historians because it made the American judicial system look like a drunken farce. Bean was his own law, frequently appointing himself to cases he had no jurisdiction over. It captures the era of the Old West, where the person with the loudest voice and the most whiskey was the one who decided who lived and who died. Number 8. Panning Gold in Rockerville. This image takes us to Rockerville, Dakota in 1889. While the great gold rushes of '49 were long over, these men were still out there, washing and panning for every tiny grain of metal. This photo was suppressed because it showed the extreme poverty of the mining life. These men were living in rags, working in freezing water, and barely making enough to eat. It shatters the myth of the lucky prospector and reveals the reality of the thousands of men who died penniless in the mud, chasing a dream that had already vanished. Number 7. Wild Bill Hickok's early years. This is a rare tintype of James Butler, Wild Bill. Hickok at age 21 in Lawrence, Kansas. It captures the man before the pistols, before the long hair, and before the fame. This photo was once tucked away because it didn't fit the gunfighter image that Hickok would later cultivate. He looks like a normal, quiet young man. It reminds us that the legends of the West were often self-created, and that behind every Wild Bill was a person who started out with nothing but a desire for adventure. Number 6. The Sodhouse Sisters. This image features the sisters of Custer County, Nebraska, who built their own home out of the very earth they farmed. This photo was often omitted from history books because it showed female self-sufficiency in a way that was uncomfortable for the time. These women didn't need a husband to tame the land. They did it themselves, block by block. It highlights the invisible history of the women who didn't just follow the men, but led the way in establishing homes in the most desolate parts of the plains. Do you think you could have survived a winter in a house made of dirt? Drop a yes or no in the comments. We're curious how many pioneers we have in the audience today. Number 5. Bass Reeves, the Shadow Marshal. This is the legendary Bass Reeves, the first black deputy U.S. Marshal west of the Mississippi. He was so effective at his job that outlaws were terrified of his name alone. These photos were rare because Reeves often operated in deep disguise, moving through the territory as a beggar, a farmer, or even an outlaw himself to catch his prey. The authorities often kept his identity a secret to protect his effectiveness, but these few images reveal a man of incredible physical and moral presence who brought over 3,000 criminals to justice. Number 4. The Social Secret of the White Dance. This image captures the white dance, a social tradition that was a rare break from the rigid gender roles of the 19th century. In these dances, women took the lead, choosing their partners and even politely requesting dances. These photos were often suppressed by religious groups who found the reversal of power to be scandalous. It shows a softer, more human side of the frontier, where community and respect were forged through the simple act of a dance under the prairie stars. Number 3. Rose Dunn's Double Life. This is the enigmatic Rose Dunn. She was a nurse who fell in love with an outlaw and became a vital part of his criminal network. This photo captures her in a moment of quiet reflection, far away from the shootouts and robberies. Her story was often banned from polite conversation because she represented a moral ambiguity that the West didn't want to admit, that good people could be drawn into bad lives by the sheer desperation and passion of the frontier. Number 2. The tallest cowboy, Ralph Tex Madsen. This image features Ralph Tex Madsen, an American cowboy who stood at a staggering height of over 2 meters. He was a visual marvel of the 1880s, but his photos were often hidden because he made everyone around him look small, literally. He was a symbol of the outsized legends of the West, a man who couldn't fit into a standard bunkhouse or ride a standard horse. He reminds us that the West was a place where larger than life wasn't just a metaphor, it was a physical reality. Number 1. Pearl Hart, the final outlaw. This is the most famous banned mugshot in Arizona history, Pearl Hart. After pulling off a bold stagecoach robbery, she became a media sensation. She was one of the first outlaws to utilize the media, posing for photos in her cell and selling her story. Her photo was suppressed by the authorities because she made crime look daring and heroic. She proved that the Wild West didn't care about your gender. If you had the courage to pull the trigger, the world would know your name. She was the final exclamation point on the era of the outlaw, a woman who broke every rule and left a legacy that the history books are still trying to figure out.